Let's see what we have here. Hi, I'm live, I'm told. And wow, let's see if we can't get these in the same direction so that we're live on both and I'm looking at the same in the same direction. Hi. Yeah. Okay. Taking It Black. I'm your host. I'm attorney Valerie Hicks Hale, and I am in the studios of KISS 987 KISS FM. So if you'll go to the YouTube page, you can find us there, 987 KISS FM. And you can always find us on Facebook. So that's where we are right now. On Sundays at 1 on the YouTube page, we're streaming live, and that's more of I guess we call it a podcast. So, wow, we're going to get right into the subject today. I have a guest on our last subject that deals with the high speed chase that took place in Vestavia. He's not going to be talking about that incident in particular, but we'll be discussing high speed chases in particular. And he's going to give us some insight on that, what to expect if you are if you see that taking place around you, and for God's sake, to avoid it ourselves. And then, just the practical aspect of it the result of those. There's so much death and carnage that results from those. So we're going to talk about all that as well. Let's just get into the program right now. And I want to start off with those split-second decisions that officers have to make. And I want to share with you some information that I have. And again, the purpose of this is to give the community information that they can use. We need our children to have this information. We need to have this information. And we need to have it so that when we are looking at who we're going to vote for certain positions, we have the information we need to make good decisions on even our choices in individuals who will represent us and make policy on on this type of subject matter. Those split-second decisions have been shaped recently, or in the last 4 decades by the Supreme Court. Officers using deadly force rely on this legal doctrine called the split-second decision. And there's a movement going forward right now that's really trying to change that standard. That standard was, as I said, set by the Supreme Court. And so let's look at some of the cases that I'm talking about. Adam Toledo. He was a 13-year-old in Chicago who tossed his guns and had his hands held up as he was being shot. Makia Bryant, a 16-year-old who was shot lunging at another teenager. And then we have Terrell Wilson, a 33-year-old who was mentally ill and homeless. And he had a knife in the presence of officers. And I think he shouted something like, kill me. And the officers did shoot and kill him. The officer's justification for the use of force in each of those instances will differ. They're going to be different from one to another. But when we look at them individually, then we can look at why that split-second decision may or may not have been the best decision at that time. Again, they rely on this doctrine. I said 4 decades ago. It was really 3 decades ago. As a result, the consequences is now that this has become a police culture. It's no, well, you can't subject a police officer's decision. You can't subject them to scrutiny because they had to make a split-second decision. And because they made this split-second decision, we don't necessarily get a chance to second guess them. No matter how unnecessary a killing may have appeared, as they say, on the back end or in hindsight. The problem with that is a disproportionate number of shootings are by white officers against people of color. And in the case of Adam Taleo, Makia Bryant, and Terrell Wilson, that has brought up significant scrutiny. Many experts say that split-second decision is to blame for many of those deaths because the officers are relying on the fact, well, I had to make a split-second decision, and so that's what I did, even though it may not seem reasonable to you. The officer, of course, and this is where I want to make sure that we talk about the legalities of it. Any officer is duty bound to take action to protect the life of another citizen or the life of himself or herself. And that standard, I really think that standard should not be judged too harshly. But I do think there's room to judge. There's always room to scrutinize. Maybe we won't call it judging. There's room to scrutinize those actions, if only for the purpose of training and maybe changing policy. In the case of 12-year-old Tamir Rice, he was playing outside in the park with a gun, a toy gun. No one else was around him. The officer approached, and in my opinion, because the child was outside by himself, no one else was around, he created a circumstance where he ultimately had to make a split-second decision to shoot the 12-year-old or not. And he made the decision to shoot the 12-year-old. There are too many other things, in my opinion, that could have been done that would not have forced his hand to use deadly force. So, yeah, we have split-second decisions. And a lot of times those split-second decisions, there's nothing that could have been done. And then there are times when there are situations where there's something could have been done. And I think the situation with Tamir Rice is one such situation. He could have used a loudspeaker to get a distance away to tell the young boy to drop the weapon. He didn't have to drive right up on him, which he did. He drove right up on him. And when he said he told him to drop the weapon, he did it so quickly the child didn't have a chance to understand what he meant or why he was even approaching him. Again, in my opinion, this officer created a situation where he ultimately had to make a, quote, split-second decision. I really don't think the same can be said in the situation, though, of Makia Bryant. And I talked a little bit about that last week. In the case of the 16-year-old Makia Bryant, she was shot to death by Officer Nicholas Reardon on during a violent altercation. The officer emerged at the scene after having been called by dispatch to say there was an assault taking place. Whoever made the call, and it is said that Makia herself made the call and stated that these young women or women have come over here to start a fight, something to that effect. And then she proceeded to go outside. Now he's been told that we've got people over at a house that have come there to fight. He gets there and he sees that a fight is indeed in the process, right, as he gets out, and asks her to drop her weapon or to get down. And having asked that 3 times, she didn't. he could see clearly that she was about to stab another innocent young girl. Now, when I use the word innocent, I mean someone who is unarmed. Let me just say that someone who is unarmed. She is about to use a knife on an individual who is unarmed. So I hear. I've talked with several people this week after last week's show, and I've talked with several who have said, he could have done any number of things. He could have shot in the air. He could have shot her in the leg. He could have. If that were your child on the other end of that knife, I don't know that we would be saying that. I don't think that we can second guess him, because in that situation, that really was a split second decision. He gets out of the car. He sees someone who is going to be hit or stabbed with a knife if he doesn't do something immediately. Now, that is a split second decision that had to be made. It wasn't a situation he created. The case of Tamir Rice, the officer drove up on that young man, on that young boy, 12 years old, drove up on him, who happened to be holding a toy gun, and said, "Drop your weapon." Again, the kid didn't know what he's talking about. He's a kid playing with a toy. But anyway, he's told him to drop his weapon. And then when he didn't, he shot and killed him. In my opinion, when you look at the video, it was too, his demand was followed too quickly by the shooting, because he didn't give him time. It wasn't enough time for him to make, to hear and process what the officer was saying. He was out there playing by himself, not seeing anyone around. So he had to stop and process what was being said to him. And that, again, it wasn't enough time for him to do that. As a result, the officer shoots and kills this young boy. Now, again, he created that situation. That's not the case when you look at Makia Bryant. She was a pretty hefty sized young woman. I understand she was 16, but again, there's no way of telling that by looking at her. And even if you could, she's a 16-year-old with a knife who was about to attack another teenager who did not have a weapon. So I think when we're talking about challenging law enforcement when they make that split second decision, and we do the Monday morning quarterbacking, and it really was a split second decision, and we're hammering on them for having made the wrong decision. I don't know that that's fair. And I think when we hammer on police officers and we complain and we demand justice in cases where the officer did the best he could with the information that he had at the time, I think it diminishes, and it really puts us in a bad position when we have a legitimate cause for concern. I think it just waters down our argument that there needs to be an overhaul of police departments and policing all over the country. So I wanted to share that those scenarios with you to look at, what are we saying when we say split second decisions? Is there a real, is there a reason why in some cases that split second decision may be something that we scrutinize closely, and in others we just have to say, he was there, she was there, I wasn't, and we have to give them grace in that situation, even though it was a bad outcome. The situation of the young man in Texas sitting in his living room eating ice cream, and the officer comes in and shoots and kills him because she thought she was in her apartment and that he was an intruder. Again, she created that situation. You can't create the situation and then begin to scream, "Oh, I only had a split second to make a decision." No, in situations like that, you can't creating that situation, and then lying, and then standing behind the culture, the police culture that has been established through this split-second decision out of the Supreme Court. um, it's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous to say that someone, an officer, should not be challenged on a decision that they made when they created the situation to begin with. I think the situation with Adam Toledo is a one that that is more difficult to analyze in this way, in this simplistic way we're doing right now. I don't know that it would be as easy a case to say, okay, yeah, he created it, he didn't, and he created it in a situation with Makia, or he didn't create the situation in the case of Makia Bryant, but the officer did create the situation in the case of Tamir Rice. Those are two black and white situations. In the case of Adam Toledo, it really is a blurred line. The line is much more blurred there because he's running, he's chasing this kid. We know the kid has a gun. That's not that really isn't up for discussion. We know that there was a gun, but he asked the kid to drop the gun. Now, if you're going to ask the kid to drop the gun, again, give the kid enough time to drop the gun and put his hands up. He did in this case, and he was shot while putting his hands up. I think the officer was exhausted. The officer was running. I'm not in his head, certainly can't judge what's in his heart, but I'm less inclined to say that this was a situation where he could have done something different. I would feel more comfortable, though, if a jury made that decision, if a grand jury made that decision, and they would have all of the information. They would get they should. We're talking about grand jury in this situation. And we know that prosecutors can put forth to a grand jury what they want them to have and keep back information if they want a case to go in another direction. So if you've got a good, honest DA in this particular case, in the case of Adam Toledo, put the information out there and let the grand jury decide whether this goes to trial, because this really is a close call, in my opinion. Would love to hear what you all have to say about this. I wish we had telephone access, and we're still working on that. But I really would love to hear what you all have to say on this issue. Wow. Let's move to the next story, the next case that I would like to discuss with you. What next topic? And this one was one I'm just throwing in today. I really didn't have it on our website of what we were going to discuss, but I just have to deal with this one. A Florida court is now going to determine whether, the Supreme Court is going to decide whether a teacher can hang a Black Lives Matter flag in their classroom. And the reason I say the Supreme Court, right now, this is in Florida. It's in state court, but it is a matter that deals with your constitutional rights, the constitutional right of free speech here. So this case is eventually going to the Supreme Court. But right now, a Florida high school teacher has filed a lawsuit and is suing the school district. I want to get that right, because she was told to take down her Black Lives Matter flag. Now, she put the flag up because she wanted kids to feel like they were in a safe place when they came into her classroom, because one of her students had been shot and killed by an officer, a sheriff's deputy in that in that district. Ironically, the school is Robert E. Lee High School. So it's okay to name a school after a traitor to this country. It's okay to name a school after an individual who was an insurrectionist and who fought to it, who really led the Civil War. That's okay, but you can't have a sign out front of that school or out front of a classroom in that school that says Black Lives Matter. I'm struggling with that already, and we hadn't even gotten to the facts of the case. And the court is going to have to deal with that. The English teacher at the school, it was an English teacher who hung the flag outside the classroom after, as I said, one of her students, Reginald Boston, was shot and killed by Jacksonville. It was Jacksonville, Florida, sheriff's deputy last year. This teacher also helped to co-found a program that aims to help at-risk students in Jacksonville. And she said that this young man was a member of that nonprofit that she started. So she hung that flag out so that students would know that that classroom was a safe place for them to come and discuss the loss of their classmate. She said his life matters, period. His life matters. And she wanted them to see that. But the problem is that the school district or the principal decided that Black Lives Matter sign is going to be a problem because it spews hate, or because it has a meaning that suggests racism in and of itself. We all know this is not true. The court now has an opportunity. We've been saying it doesn't mean that we diminish the lives of anybody else. When we say Black Lives Matter, it doesn't mean that Black Lives Matter over anyone else's life. It's not a racial slur. It's not a slur of any kind. It's not an attempt to diminish anyone else in any other group. What it simply means is that despite what history has taught, Black lives do matter. And so with respect to that, maybe the court now has an opportunity to set the record straight on that we're actually going to litigate this, whether Black Lives Matter is a slur or is it really free speech? And in her lawsuit, she alleges that the school district consistently undermined her program by really demoting it from a class, because it started out as a class, to a club. And she also says that the students are undermined in terms of trying to learn their history or learn true Black history. She said she just felt in general that the school did not support the Black students that attended. So she said, I hung the Black Lives Matter flag out as the final straw. So what we're looking at here in this case is balancing free speech against the principle of greater control. Because when you look at a government entity, the government entity has a right for greater control depending on what the entity is. In the First Amendment, of course, is a foundational principle of democracy in our country. You have the right to free speech, but free speech is limited. You can't scream fire in a crowded theater. That's well established. The government generally has a greater power to dictate policy when it acts in certain capacities. For example, the capacity of making sure that anyone sitting in a theater is free of being trampled on by someone joking, hollering free speech. Also, education. or an employer or jailer. Employers can say what we can and cannot say in the workplace, as long as it's not subjected, as long as it's not carried out in a manner that is discriminatory based on race or age or national origin, the proscribes of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. A school principal can restrict students from cursing in school. Okay, that's the greater purpose for the school. However, a school principal has limited ability to criticize students who are cursing off campus. The principle of greater good or greater government control applies broadly in situations where schools, and that's what we're going to talk about right now, public schools. The paramount duty of the school is to have a safe environment for children to learn. So as one federal court put it, learning is more important in the classroom than free speech. So they can limit speech in a classroom because they say learning is more important than free speech. And that really is, it's important. It is important for our kids to have a safe place to learn. But in this situation where free speech is suggesting that it's speaking out against racism, I think that there's a blur. The line is blurred there. I think that is a point of a lesson in and of itself. It's a lesson well taught in and of itself. Would love to know, do you think that the Supreme Court will do the right thing, or the Florida court will do the right thing before it even gets to the Supreme Court? Will the Florida court do the right thing in making a decision that Black Lives Matter is not a slur, in making the decision that a Black Lives Matter sign is free speech, and that the teacher had a right to put the Black Lives Matter sign outside of her class, and students have a right to wear Black Lives Matter shirts? That'll be next, right? Let's see, where are we? Okay, we're a little more than halfway there. I want to now get into the last subject for today, and that is the statistics on high-speed chases. And I'm going to shift my, I'm trying to shift my, yeah, okay, we're shifting the focus just a little so we can include my special guest who is going to, okay, Facebook, y'all may not be able to see them, but he's here. He's in the studio. Wilson Hale is with me today, and he's going to discuss in a little bit more detail than I will. I'll say in more specifics, because he has done a great deal of causing loud noises to come across the airwaves while I'm doing my show. I don't think so. Anyway, he's going to talk about the specifics of the high-speed chases from law enforcement's perspective and from the officer's perspective, what we can and can expect out of the state regarding this. But anyway, before we get there, let me just do my spiel. How about that? And then we'll get to the questions, the specific questions about that. High-speed chases. I was shocked when I did the research on this. Police pursuits I always knew police pursuits were extremely dangerous, but I had no idea to what level of danger they were. From 2014 to 2018, there have been, let me see, over 1,699 fatal crashes. Now, these are fatal crashes, not just crashes. There are a lot more crashes, but fatal crashes involving police chases. 56% of the people killed during those pursuits are someone other than the fleeing driver. So, well, let me give you a couple of more statistics. At least 2,000 people were killed in those years between 2014 and 2018. 2,005 people, at least 2,005 people were killed, and 1,123 were not the driver of the fleeing vehicle. That's in Alabama. I'm a little bit concerned that, oh, I'm sorry, that's not Alabama. I'm sorry, don't go tell anybody that was out. That's nationwide. I'm a little bit concerned that we have this number of fatal crashes, and it's done because police officers are pursuing a fleeing vehicle. I think sometimes it can't be helped. I think it's sometimes there's no way of getting around it. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Situations where the officers should maybe and shouldn't maybe get involved in a high-speed chase. Some states have a policy that limits the circumstances under which police officers may engage in pursuit. A police officer, in some cases, can only initiate a pursuit if that it starts off. They give them all of these ifs. If the officer reasonably believes that the need to apprehend the suspect outweighs the risk or condition of the risk of injury, the risk of a collision, the risk of death, perhaps, to another person. So he's having to weigh that. As careful as officers may be, they can't control what the individual who is in that car ahead of them is going to do. So the question is, do we want officers to pursue fleeing offenders in our neighborhoods, those individuals who said, well, it's okay for them to do? What if they don't pursue these individuals, then they might as well just hang up their badge that this is what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to pursue individuals who are fleeing from them. I think we need to look at that a little bit more closely. Do you want them doing that in your neighborhood? In a neighborhood where there are children out playing, is that something that we are expecting officers to do? Do we want officers to pursue fleeing offenders in near a park? Do we want to really put limits on law enforcement's use of high-speed chases and say, okay, they don't do it at all? Or do we want to have maybe a more reasonable limit? In the case recently of Jordan Ricks, 28-year-old, that this happens this week. Ricks is suspected, and I want to say suspected. Ricks is suspected of causing the fatal crash during a police pursuit in Homewood this past week. His chase or his collision resulted in the mother of two, Robin Herring. It resulted in her death. She has two children. The collision occurred off of I-65 and Lakeshore, that exit. It's my understanding that his car, the car that Ricks was driving, was observed leaving the exit and crossing the median, going airborne, and hitting the car in which Miss Herring was a passenger. Again, a beautiful mother now is gone too soon. Children are without their mother. She was a nurse practitioner. Patients are without what I understand was an excellent practitioner, all because of this chase. Now, the Vestavia police officers, in all fairness to them, when he hit that car, or when the cars collided, the officers stopped and rendered aid to Miss Herring, and then called for help. By then, he had taken off. They had to find him in Tuscaloosa. He ran off. But here, I want to make sure that we know who this individual is, and this may be a story for another day. Rick is a former UAB business student and football player. He's been recognized for his entrepreneurial success after an athletic injury led him to have to leave the team. But he launched this business that uses biofeedback to help train players effectively to be safe, to effectively stay safe. I did a tour over at UAB a while back and saw that equipment. I was so impressed by it. So if he had anything to do with that, and it was the equipment, it's on the equipment that they train with, biofeedback equipment. If he had anything to do with that, he was a very bright young man. So what was he thinking? What was he thinking to have done this? Well, Ricks is currently awaiting trial on domestic violence and strangulation charges. This goes back to 2018, 2019. I'm sure they're pending because of COVID. The Vestavia police captain said that Ricks was stopped for speeding about a quarter of a mile before Lakeshore, when the officer returned to his patrol car to conduct what was a wanted persons check. They whenever they stop you, they take your license to see if there's a warrant out for you, and if there is, then they'll take you in. Now that goes back to, that really kind of answers my question of what was he thinking? He was thinking, I don't want to go to jail today, right? And now he has a murder charge on him. So, is there? Let's go to my expert here, and I'm going to turn the camera to him.
I tell you the truth.
And we're going to get some answers today, Mr. Hale.
That's it. Hello to Facebook family. How are you, Miss Valerie?
Welcome to Taking It Black.
Welcome, Miss. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, you heard my spiel. You heard me give the information on the high-speed chases. And so let's start with, is there a national standard regarding police chases? I mean, we hear about these numbers. Is there some standard?
There's always a standard, and that really the Supreme Court has ruled on several different issues trying to make police contact, as far as your pursuit chasing, put it in a different light where it will save life. But it's always going to be somebody that's at risk. And regardless, speaking about the chase that you're talking about, the young man has never he's not a college student now, right?
Not now.
Well, there's always discretion about whether you want to pursue or not. There's restrictive periods that you don't, and then there's you might be discouraged about even practicing that. Different municipalities, as well as county, state, and government, have their policies about whether they want you to pursue or not. Some of them even have you to check in with their supervisors to maintain and let them know what's going on.
Is that before they start pursuit, or is that just
no, even during the pursuit? Once you call in, they have the information, and chances are, if he have already talked with the dispatcher at this point, he's going to tell them what the situation is. But this officer never got out of his car to even acknowledge or even tell this young man that he has a warrant. A lot of time I've been in a situation that the subject has the warrant and the police department or whoever the chain is, they can't even come pick them up because they don't have the manpower. Therefore, their officer just tell them, go and, hey, you got a warrant with so-and-so. You need to get that handled before you end up getting your car towed and you going to jail about it.
Okay.
So it's not necessary that the officer had even contacted him to let him know that he had a warrant for the first part of it, nor did the officer engage. I can't say that there was a car chase. The car had already stopped.
Well, here's the thing. In this situation, I said I don't know whether he has a warrant. I know he is on, he has a case. He has a pending case. They stopped him from speeding. And in his mind, okay, you caught me. I'm out on bond. Have I violated my bond? Am I, that could have been another issue that made him decide he wanted to take off.
What I'm saying is, from the officer's perspective, I understand from the people perspective, I would not have given chase to the young man in that kind of traffic or whatever the situation occurred at the time. Now, the officer comes up, he gets the information off the young man, he goes back to the car, you run the information that's on there. At this point, he gets the information that the young man has a warrant, and the young man decides to take off. Chances are he already know he has a warrant. He just decided to take off. Well, the officer has to engage in the
and we don't know for sure that he has one, but I think the very fact that he has a pending case could have made him believe, well, they're going to take me in because I've got a case pending and I have violated my. But how would this shows you how people don't think? Because the officer wouldn't have known that he had. There's nothing in the system that says he has a pending case. I think coming to court on that, and depending on how bad he was speeding, I don't know the particulars of it, but to the extent that it got to the point that he had to come to court, or he was speeding so badly that he was going to be arrested, then maybe he's thinking, I don't want to go back. I don't want to be incarcerated. So I'm going to leave this scene. At any rate, he has caused himself a great deal more problems than he would if he had just allowed the process to take place.
He should have allowed the process to take place. Therefore, he wouldn't be sitting in a situation where he's got a murder case on his hand today.
Right.
And that the officer has to actually acknowledge that, hey, this man, he putting his car in gear. The lights come on the rear. Those are clues to the officer. When the rear lights come on, like you're about to back up and you just see it for a second, you say, hey, he's about to run.
Yeah.
And then he shoots off into traffic where the officer got to make sure that traffic is clear for him to get on, because this guy has already judged that. So he's already got at least 3 or 4 car lengths above in front of the officer at that point. So he jumps off the exit. He loses control because he probably hit the curb down there at the bottom of the Hillcrest at about 75 or 80. And it causes him to go across another 4 lanes of traffic or something to that circumstances anyway. But the officer just has time to keep him in visual. And it is a pursuit, but the officer is not directly behind him.
Well, let me, I want to read a question that Rob Lee has.
Okay.
And Rob Lee says that law enforcement could easily upgrade the technology to avoid incidents like the ones that recently happened in the city. So what do you think?
Is he referring to that particular one?
Yeah, I think he's talking about the one that occurred in that recently occurred in it came through Vestavia, but it ended up in Homewood.
I think they can upgrade the technology, but they don't want to put the money over where it's really needed at. They don't want to put the time in that it comes to training these individuals. They don't want to put the time in where it comes to selecting people that are good officers. The biggest problem with,
and that's not to say this officer was a bad officer. Just because you make a bad decision doesn't mean that you're a bad officer. So I'm not saying that. We're not saying that at all. What I will say is when you look at what happened, you have to look at this situation and say, was it necessary? And so that was my next question.
Right.
Are police chases even necessary?
Some are. This one was not. I don't think that it was not. He had the information on hand at the point he knew who the guy was. He could have just sworn out another warrant. At some point in a safer environment, he could have executed the warrant, or somebody could have executed it. It's not about you getting the guy, us against them, or police against the public. That's not how it should be seen. But he had the information, just like in any other scenario that where people have the information. Where dealing with the young man here, they could have easily went to his house and executed a warrant and take him out safely. Or mom and dad may have just brought him down there once they found out who it was. But no, I don't agree with the car chasing going down through towns or going through districts past park where kids might be. And most car chases, they occur pretty much kind of evening toward night and doing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday on the weekend or something. So was it nighttime then?
It was no, not at the time. I mean, it was nighttime before they cleared everything up. But no, I think it was like 6:30. So it's not dark at 6:30 these days.
Well, once they just like you were speaking about the officer that was running, trying to catch up with the young man, and he's not as young as his legs are. The officer has adrenaline just as well. They don't get out there and take physical fitness tests. They do just what they need to do. And that's not speaking badly about them, but it's just the truth. They do just what's necessary and to get past their basic police academy. And once that becomes, it behooves them to continue to practice with that taser, practice with that weapon, how to pull it out, draw it, get in the line of where they can actually run a pursuit without being out of breath. Because I can just about bet you this young man that shot this 13-year-old, he was out of breath and he accidentally put his hand on the trigger and the round.
And you talk about that often, how you try, and I know when we're shooting, you always say, don't put your hand on the trigger till you're ready to pull it, because
don't put your hand on the trigger.
if you're breathing hard, you can actually pull. Yeah, if you're breathing hard, I can see you pull
your finger
the
is
trigger.
resting on the trigger. And
so it could very easily have been an accident. He told him to throw his hand. I know we're crossing stories here, but that's an important point to make.
But it's all related to law enforcement, of how training, how selecting people that are good judgment. Law is mind-boggling, because a lot of people that do hiring, they hire friends in potential bad situations that come from other departments and place them right up under the umbrella and they allow them to resign and go start somewhere else. And that's not all officers. We have a lot of good officers, but when that take place and it continue to repeat itself, that's what the people are frustrated with. It's making bad decisions, and they constantly make bad decisions on that behalf. But like I said, there's 90% of, I think, in my opinion, there's probably about 90% of good officers that actually pay attention, that want to do their job. They want to help people. But there, like you were saying about the car chase, there's a discretionary moment where it allowed the officer to make a decision related to the tactics or the temperament of the situation that's going on, and he decide whether that's a good time to do a car chase. I wouldn't. That's my opinion, but it says officer opinion just about on every document that it has to the officers. Officer's discretion whether he should make the car chase. I wasn't there, but in lieu of traffic and place where it is very delicate about light traffic ever being down there. I just put it that way.
That's true.
I can't say that there's light traffic. All of my car chases, and I've been in my fair share, they have come to where nobody has ever gotten hurt. And the situation where I did call off the chase and found out later this young man pursued the chase. He was running by himself. Somewhat 10 minutes later, he decided he was still running on the other side of Birmingham, just running. And he decided to hit this young lady, but that's another story for another day.
Okay.
But you have that discretionary moment. You have the whether you want to actually be active about those situations. Then you have the discouraging moment where the supervisor or yourself should know when to take these duties upon yourself and say, I don't want to be in this, where I got his information, I just go to his house residence, we get a team and go and extract his more.
I want to ask about training. You know, you talked about training. They need to be, trained with their guns or whatever. Should there be training for officers who are going to be stopping cars? I mean, you don't see a high-speed chase every day. I'm sure they don't do a high-speed chase every day. Is training on that necessary? And if so, how frequently should they be trained in that?
Well, anytime, and the officer was running radar, let's make sure that is stated. Mm-hmm. Anytime you're running radar, you're given pursuit anyway. It doesn't have to be called a high-speed chase or what they call 10-100. Mm-hmm. And he had the young man stop, and the young man decided to stop, and then he started to take off again. And most cases that covers car chases, usually dealing with a young individual between 18 to 24 years of age, most of them. And as you were saying, they do need training, and it's a sad thing to not get the training. And then when you get out there, the same way with a firearm, that's your first time pulling the trigger, or you feel like you need to pull the trigger and you don't know when to. They need the training how to drive. So when you get in their first car chase, you're not in downtown Birmingham and feel like you on TV and cops or something, or feel like it's you against the public. They need training on their taser so they'll know which weapon where it's sighted at on their belt, so they won't pull the wrong weapon and fire and strike somebody with a bullet instead of a taser and hollering taser, taser, taser. That doesn't excuse the officer. You should know, and they should know, and should go over this practicing. And it's no different than you playing the guitar. You want to, when you go play your outfit at the band or whatever you might do, or citing a book recital, you want to know sure that you're on point with doing what your practice is about your dream to call to duty or whatever.
Right. And I guess the final question is there a rule, a standard, or something that says, other than common sense, when to abandon a chase? Because surely at some point, any chase, unless you have a fleeing felon, someone who has killed someone, for a fact they still have a weapon, they are in a position where they may kill someone else. I could see that. But are there times when a chase should be abandoned? And is there something that says that? Who makes that determination?
Well, the officer, for the majority, the officer does. Mm-hmm. And the second part is supervision. And it determines what part of the city you're in, or if you're out in a rural area, or if you're in the city and leaving, going into a rural area. Mm-hmm. Others determine there should be a patrol supervisor that's on duty. Mm-hmm. He should be notified that you're giving pursuit. Other officers should be able to join you in the pursuit. And if they finally read the tag number or whatever, you get the tag number, or you have already gotten his license and equipment, like this situation over there, I think it should be terminated, and we can go to the house or get him on a later date. Just go ahead and make the charges. And it depends on, now, if this suspect is just going out and he is a shooter, an active shooter, mm-hmm. yes, by all means, whatever is necessary at that point, because you mm-hmm. don't know what his dynasty is. Mm-hmm. He has something else on his mind rather than just a warrant situation mm-hmm. that's going on that might be active. But in that respect, then even pit maneuvers or actually apprehending him, I would never suggest to somebody to shoot out of a car to stop another car, because mm-hmm. if you shoot him, then the car, and there have been situations like such. Mm-hmm. If you shoot the car and you shoot the suspect, then now you got a car driving itself at 100 miles an hour, and there's no telling where that will go to. But they have things in place dealing with spikes or roadblocks, rolling roadblocks. Yeah. Those things, those should be conscious of the the officer himself as well as the supervisor. He should be able to tell his supervisor what the circumstances are that surrounds him, whether he needs to engage or not engage, or we'll go get him a later date. And the supervisor himself should be able to go out, listen to what's going on the radio and say, hey, you're headed into a downtown area. That's one of the hottest areas of exiting that we have in our city. Don't turn off the pursuit. Don't follow this.
And in this case, I said,
and as Rob was saying, that maturity does help.
Yeah. And in this case, where the guy ran ahead and was getting off the exit, by the time the officer got off, he had already hit this, had hit the car. The speed of the chase, does it matter?
Well, the speed of the chase matters as far as injury to property or injury, bodily harm. That matters, but any pursuit, it doesn't matter what it is. Even low speed chases are still dangerous. Even low speed chases, you just got a lot of maneuvering because they're trying to get to the point where they can stomp the gas and get away. It's still a pursuit. So most of them that are low speed chases, they're trying to cut through yards and playgrounds and stuff like that to keep so it's really not, it's still high speed at where you're going through. So I wouldn't suggest, it's still a dangerous call to engage yourself and do something like such.
Would you like to see a state standard in Alabama that, and is it possible, because every situation is so different,
No.
is it possible to have some state standard about high speed chases?
It's not, because if you put something in law, they're going to start playing politics with it. And
that's true now.
And then everything has a political move with people that we see in office today. So it's just going to be another move for political. Whether I get in, there's a lot of people that in certain departments from the city to county and I've never, in my 33 years with the state, we never changed policy where we didn't pursue. We just made a conscious decision about where we were doing pursue that.
And I would imagine, I mean, you can't do everything that is absolutely positively on the point of accuracy. It's just, I mean, we're talking about human beings here. He's got, or she is the officer, he or she has what she's thinking, feeling, doing. Then there is the variable of the individual who is driving away. So when you look at these, it's you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Well, there's so many variables.
And
there's a wide scope. I mean, from children being in the back seat of a car, and stealing cars at a service station, and not knowing that the child is in the back seat, and some of the officers did not know that gave chase to the car, but they stopped once they called and said that the individual was, that the lady said her baby was in the back seat of the car. And
go on.
And they terminated the chase then. And that situation, we actually called had OnStar to locate the car. And we followed that from that perspective.
That's great. That's
so
good.
It's all kinds of, if you're conscious about your job and you really practice it to do better in what you can do of services, there's all kinds of different relative things that you can do to not give chase to just because you feel like you have to catch them. You got to get them.
So what would be the lesson learned for an officer in a situation like this? We don't have all of the circumstances here, but just based on what we know, what would you think the lesson learned would be?
Well, lesson learned, what you want to do is be conscious about your surroundings. Luckily, the young men didn't put the car in reverse, because that situation has happened also, where as soon as they get out and they get in between the car and the subject's car, they'll put it in reverse and try to hit them going backwards first before they even take off.
So it could have been two people killed if he was thinking like that. Kill the officer and then have...
Exactly. So you have to be conscious about what you have in your environment. I'm not sure if the car belonged to him. And my word to the officer, I've always, if I knew I was going to do a traffic stop, before I even elevated the siren or turn on the blue lights, I would run the tag first, because I know I'm going to stop it. Therefore, I know what's going on and what's about to transpire is a traffic stop. Therefore, the office know what's going on, and they know that there's a warrant. They're going to send somebody automatically to me to assist me while I have this individual where he is or where the traffic stop is. And you would know if the subject has a warrant if you go on and run that tag at the time, because the tag will pull up on the NCIC and tell you there's a active warrant on that individual. So those are just precautionary measures that they can take to prevent, or had he stayed up there and actually got the young man out of the car just talking with him, then he could have asked him about the warrant once he got out of the car. But the young man had a second moment to think, and he decided to put it in gear and gun it to the floor and take off.
You know, I've never understood why officers have asked young men to get out of their car and to follow them to their squad cars.
Yes.
That happened to Joel. I never understood that. Why, whenever I'm stopped, I'm never asked to get out of my car. But now maybe it's not a bad idea.
Well,
I don't know.
It's not of all circumstances. And the reason I say that is because if he had already ran his tag, they call it the 28, and some call it the 27. But if he had run the tag and it did come back with a hot warrant on it, the dispatcher could have been checking that while the officer was getting him out of the car. And that would take out the fact that he can actually take off the run or whatever the situation that may have escalated to the point of what he could actually do. Okay. So I think Rob's trying to call in on you.
Well, you know what? We're going to have to give. He is our most loyal. He's the most loyal listener, and I'm going to have to give him a special number. So, Rob, I'm calling you, giving you a special number to call in next week because you have such great insight. Thank you. But we're at the end of the show now.
Well,
thank you for giving me the sharing with me and the audience that information, and hopefully it's information that people can use.
I hope so. But like I said, I wasn't there. We only can take what was given to us. And that officer, I'm guessing that he has enough training that he made the correct decision. And I'm glad. I hate the fact that the subject actually, she had 2 children and the husband. And she was the passenger in the car.
And she was the passenger. So yeah.
You know, that's very that is not good at all.
No.
And you know, we just pray for the family. And we're praying for the officer as well. You don't ever want to be in that kind of circumstance.
No, exactly.
So I just pray for all of them and hope that they'll have a better insight.
Okay. So we are here at the end of Taking It Black here on 987kiss.com. Go to YouTube. You can find us Sundays at 1:05 really. Once you end YouTube, you go to the YouTube suite. You can find us at Kiss 987. I think that's it. 987 Kiss FM. Anyway, thank you for listening and being a part of the show. Bye.